November 10, 1972, University Arena, Albuquerque. A crowd of 14,500 roared as Elvis hit the stage, lights blazing and speakers shaking the rafters. Midway through his set, a teenage fan collapsed just feet from the stage. What happened next stunned everyone present and would echo far beyond that night. The night air inside University Arena was thick with anticipation. November 10th, 1972, would be remembered as one of the most electric evenings in Albuquerque. Fans pressed against the barricades, their hands clutching bootlegged posters, scarves, and handwritten letters. At precisely 8:07 p.m., the stage lights flared, illuminating Elvis Presley in a swirl of white jumpsuit and signature scarf. He stepped forward, scanning the crowd as though measuring the heartbeat of 14,500 people, each pulse echoing in the wooden rafters. The opening chords of Burning Love exploded through the speakers. Screams erupted, a tide of sound that shook the arena walls and reverberated through the floor beneath their feet. Teenagers jumped, arms waving, voices mingling into a single, chaotic roar. The band's drums and guitars pounded like distant thunder, synchronized to the collective excitement. Every pair of eyes seemed glued to the king of rock, but something unusual stirred on the left side of the stage. A sharp, collective gasp cut through the cacophony. Heads turned, bodies froze. In the blur of waving arms and fluttering scarves, a teenage boyletter identified as Jason Martinez, 16, had collapsed near the barricade. Security rushed forward, yet the surge of fans made progress slow and chaotic. The arena's energy shifted abruptly. What had been uncontainable joy now teetered on the edge of panic. Elvis, mid-verse, hesitated, a beat longer than any previous pause. The crowd noticed, whispering questions in a rising wave of tension. Some fans leaned over, scanning the scene, hearts pounding as adrenaline mixed with concern. The roar of the audience had fractured, fragments of screams and shocked murmurs colliding. In that instant, the entire arena's focus narrowed to a single, fragile figure on the floor. The sudden silence was deafening. Could one moment truly alter the tone of 14,500 hearts? Fans gripped each other's arms, some choking back tears, others whispering, "Is he okay?" The music's rhythm had not stopped entirely, but it faltered. A subtle hesitation in the drums that only a few could detect amid the surrounding noise. The king's gaze never wavered. There, beneath the glare of stage lights and the hum of anxious spectators, something profound was about to unfold. Have you ever felt excitement twist into worry in an instant? How does one person's crisis ripple through thousands of witnesses? The next movement in the concert would decide whether the night remained a spectacle or became a story remembered for. Compassion above all. Jason Martinez lay sprawled near the barricade, his face pale beneath the harsh stage lights. The roar of 14,500 fans fractured into a jumble of panic, confusion, and alarm. Security Chief Don Miller sprinted toward him, a cluster of guards flanking, but the surging crowd made their approach treacherous. Teenagers leaned forward on tiptoe, some reaching out, others frozen in disbelief. The arena went dead silent for a moment, broken only by the distant echo of a snare drum, almost imperceptible. Fred Lawson, the announcer, stepped forward clutching a microphone, his voice trembling as he called for calm. "Please, everyone, remain calm." His words barely penetrated the stunned hush. Cameras flashed from the upper tiers, capturing frames of concern, of chaos, of the extraordinary tension that gripped every corner of the arena. Parents gripped children, friends held each other, and the king's presence on stage became the singular focus. What would he do next? The question hung over the crowd, heavier than the spotlight beams. Elvis paused mid-song. The microphone trembled slightly in his hand, the signature scarf slipping over one shoulder. For a heartbeat, he appeared frozen, caught between the performance he had rehearsed countless times and the urgent humanity unfolding beneath him. Security shifted uneasily. Some urged continuation. Others hesitated, unsure if the show should stop. Meanwhile, whispers spread like wildfire. Did he see the boy? Will he help? The band faltered. The guitars muted in an almost subconscious response to the collective tension. From the barricade, fans craned their necks. Some attempted to move closer to assist, only to be gently held back by guards. Jason's shallow breaths were audible now in the sudden quiet, each inhalation amplifying the gravity of the moment. A mother in the third row clasped her hands over her mouth, tears spilling freely. Adolescents who had been screaming, dancing, and waving posters moments ago now stood rigid, transfixed by the vulnerability of a single human life amidst a sea of thousands. Then, a subtle shift. Elvis leaned forward, eyes locked on Jason, and gave a brief, calm nod to Chief Miller. The spotlight didn't leave. He remained fully aware of the collapsing teen, fully aware of every pair of eyes measuring his next movement. The arena hung on a delicate balance, every second stretching longer than any fan had anticipated. What would the king choose? The continuation of spectacle or the call of compassion? When crisis strikes unexpectedly, do we react instinctively, or do we pause to act with purpose? As the crowd waited, breaths collectively held, the stage seemed to shrink. In that suspended moment, everyone, fans, guards, musicians, realized the night would be remembered not for the music alone, but for what happened next. The spotlight doesn't leave Elvis frozen. Then does something no one expected. Elvis dropped the microphone with a solid thud, the sound echoing sharply through the arena and cutting through the uneasy murmur of 14,500 fans. The sudden silence was deafening. He stepped off the main stage platform, carefully navigating through the scattered stage, props and cables, moving toward Jason Martinez without hesitation. His voice, calm and commanding, pierced the charged atmosphere. "Are you okay, man?" The words, simple yet profound, transformed the tension in the air. Security Chief Don Miller halted in surprise, unsure whether to intervene or step aside. Guards who had been ready to shield Elvis now followed his lead, circling the fallen teen but allowing the king to set the pace. Camera flashes from the upper tiers flickered like lightning, capturing every angle. Elvis kneeling beside Jason, hand extended, scarf slipping slightly from his shoulder. The crowd held its breath. Even the band, sensing the gravity of the moment, paused mid-note, their instruments humming softly in the background. Fans craned forward, leaning over barricades, trying to glimpse what was unfolding inches from the stage. Some whispered prayers. Others covered their mouths in shock. The arena went dead silent again, as if collectively acknowledging that this was no ordinary concert moment. Jason stirred slightly, his lips trembling. Elvis motioned to a security guard for water, checking the teenager's pulse with careful hands. The king's eyes, usually sparkling with performance energy, now reflected genuine concern. Every single person in the arena, from the front row to the upper tiers, felt the gravity of compassion unfolding in real time. Then a hush deepened. Jason whispered something inaudible at first, but it was enough to catch Elvis's attention. The king leaned closer, nodding, a subtle smile breaking across his face. In front of 14,500 people, the act of empathy became a public declaration. Greatness wasn't only measured in showmanship or fame, but in the courage to act humanely when the unexpected strikes. The crowd, sensing the shift, exhaled collectively, some releasing tears they had been holding back. How does a public figure balance performance with humanity in a split second? Could you find such calm focus amidst thousands of eyes? A soft swell of music returned as the band cautiously resumed, but the atmosphere had changed entirely. The collective energy no longer revolved around spectacle alone. It centered on a shared recognition of compassion witnessed firsthand. Bootleg scarves waved gently, the crowd now amplifying the empathy rather than chaos. In that singular moment, Elvis had transformed the narrative. A concert was no longer just entertainment. It was a stage for humanity. The audience's murmurs grew into cheers, not for the songs, but for the king's act of kindness. Camera lenses captured every detail, the scarf draped over his shoulder, the tender hand on Jason's back, the steady reassurance in his gaze. What had begun as panic was now awe, a collective catharsis sweeping through thousands. And yet, the story was far from over. And then the teenager whispers something that shocks the king. Elvis extended his hand and gently helped Jason Martinez to a seated position at the edge of the stage. The teenager's legs trembled, but the reassuring weight of the king's presence gave him courage. Elvis draped his white jacket over Jason's shoulders, the soft fabric a shield against the chill of nerves and stage lights. The band, sensing the moment's intimacy, resumed softly, their instruments weaving a gentle backdrop that contrasted with the roar of earlier songs. The crowd, initially tense, began to shift. The atmosphere was no longer dominated by spectacle. It was filled with awe. Teenagers near the barricade wiped tears from their eyes, some hugging friends tightly, others raising hands as a silent gesture of solidarity. Bootleg scarves waved like flags of empathy, a symbolic acknowledgement that the community had collectively witnessed something extraordinary. Whispers ran through the arena, questions turning into expressions of wonder. Did you see that? He actually stopped for him. I've never seen anything like it. The collective energy was fragile, suspended between amazement and emotional release, yet it pulsed stronger than any opening chord of a song. Elvis leaned closer to Jason, speaking softly, words lost to most in the upper tiers, but the tone carried calm, patient, and entirely human. The king's attention was singular. No stage antics, no choreography, no forced smiles, just an authentic moment of care that stretched over every row and seat. Security Chief Don Miller relaxed slightly, realizing the decision to allow Elvis this compassionate gesture had transformed what could have been chaos into a shared experience of catharsis. Then, from the upper tiers, a spontaneous chant erupted. Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. It spread like wildfire, swelling through the arena, creating a resonance that bound 14,500 people together. The chant was not for the music alone, but for the empathy displayed, a recognition that in that instant, compassion had become legendary. Cameras flashed, capturing the unity of fans and performer, and soft strings from the band underscored the emotional crescendo. Every pair of eyes tracked the interaction, a teen recovering confidence, a king displaying humanity, a crowd learning the weight of shared vulnerability. The crowd's energy began to ripple forward. Teens near the stage passed water to those behind them. Fans raised their arms to shield younger attendees, and whispers of admiration floated like currents through the upper levels. It was no longer about the performance alone. It had become a communal moment, a testament to the power of presence and deliberate choice. Each gesture, no matter how small, contributed to the arena-wide transformation. How often do we get to witness true compassion in real time? Would you act as courageously under such intense scrutiny? Elvis's choice had shifted the narrative. What started as a crisis was now an emblem of humanity. The lights, once harsh and dazzling, now highlighted unity and empathy. The audience, once frenzied, became participants in a shared moral experience. It was a transformation in front of thousands, unexpected, organic, and unforgettable. And yet, the story was not complete. What Elvis would do next would solidify this night in history. But the real surprise is yet to come. What Elvis does next cements this night in legend. The following morning, Albuquerque awoke to a story that would spread far beyond the university arena. Newspapers printed photographs of Elvis, kneeling beside Jason Martinez, the white scarf slipping from his shoulder, hand resting gently on the teen's back. Headlines spoke not only of the concert but of the compassion that had punctuated it. Radio stations replayed eyewitness accounts, fans calling in breathless, describing how the king of rock had paused mid-song to tend to a young fan in distress. Local talk shows invited attendees to share their experiences. Teenagers recounted how they had watched in awe as Elvis chose humanity over performance. Parents spoke of relief and admiration, recounting the silence that had descended over 14,500 spectators as the act unfolded. Even band members later reflected in interviews that they had felt something unprecedented in the arena that night. A collective empathy that had transformed a standard show into a legendary moment. Meanwhile, Jason's story inspired the creation of a small fan-led initiative, quietly named the Fans First Fund. Its purpose, to provide support for young concertgoers in need, ensuring no child would feel alone or neglected during high-energy events. Plaques commemorating the night were later installed at the university arena. Photographs capturing the precise moment Elvis knelt beside Jason's scarf in hand, gentle eyes fixed on the teen. It became a symbol of responsibility, of influence used for good, and of the ripple effect a single choice could ignite across the nation. The narrative traveled through fan networks and word of letters poured into Elvis's management, some offering thanks, others pledging support for youth safety at concerts. The arena's ordinary walls had become the site of an extraordinary story, one that reminded everyone present and those who would learn of it that fame carried the power to transform lives in ways both subtle and profound. Can a single compassionate choice redefine an entire community's memory of a person? Would you recognize the significance of such a moment while living it? By midweek, the tale had reached other cities where Elvis would perform, setting a quiet standard among fans and staff. Vigilance and care were as important as applause. Interviews with attendees years later would recall the tension, the shock, and the eventual catharsis that had united strangers in mutual respect and admiration. The night, initially punctuated by panic, became an emblem of what was possible when one individual allowed empathy to take precedence over spectacle. Even decades later, Photographs of that night circulated in fan archives and commemorative displays. Bootleg scarves, once tossed aside in excitement, became keepsakes. The story had transcended a single performance. It had become part of Elvis's legacy, proof that the king's influence extended beyond music. The arena, the teen, the crowd, and the scarf together became the enduring symbols of a night changed forever by an unexpected act of humanity. How far can the ripple of one compassionate choice truly reach, and who else will carry it forward? Decades later, fans still recall November 10th, 1972, as the concert that stopped for a heartbeat. The image of Elvis Presley kneeling beside Jason Martinez, white scarf slipping from his shoulder, has become iconic, visual shorthand for humanity witnessed in real time. For those who were present, the memory remains vivid. The hush of 14,500 people, the delicate balance between spectacle and care, and the realization that greatness can manifest not just in performance, but in choice. Elvis's decision that night, simple in its action, profound in its impact, cemented a moral template for his fans and for entertainers who followed. It illustrated that influence carries responsibility, and that acts of compassion, even when performed under the scrutiny of thousands, have the power to ripple through time. Interviews conducted years later with attendees highlight a recurring theme: the awe of witnessing the king prioritize humanity over the show. One attendee, Maria Lopez, recalled, "I've seen 1,000 concerts since, but nothing felt as alive, as real as the moment he knelt beside that boy." The story of Jason Martinez also evolved into a narrative of resilience. By the time he reached adulthood, he had recounted that night countless times, emphasizing how a single gesture had reshaped his perception of what it meant to be seen, to be cared for, and to matter. Fan foundations, most notably the Fans First Fund, continue to remind the world of the tangible, positive consequences of small, deliberate acts. Plaques at the university arena, photographs in private collections, and bootleg scarves tucked into scrapbook pages serve as enduring artifacts of a night that had changed countless lives. Elvis's act also became a benchmark in discussions of public behavior under pressure. Scholars, journalists, and fans alike have revisited the incident to consider how empathy can coexist with celebrity, and how a moment of human connection can transform both the giver and the receiver. The king, usually defined by the spectacle of music and showmanship, became equally defined by the capacity to act with grace and immediacy when faced with a real human need. In front of 14,500 witnesses, he demonstrated that legendary status is earned as much in moral courage as in talent. How many legends are defined by what they choose to do off-script rather than on stage? Could you recognize and act on such a moment if it fell before you? The moral crystallizes. Greatness is measured not solely by applause, records, or fame, but by the decisions we make when faced with unexpected challenges. The night in Albuquerque reminds us that heroism can emerge quietly, in the pause between performance and humanity, in the split second when a choice prioritizes empathy over spectacle. Those who witnessed it were forever changed, carrying with them the subtle yet profound message that every act of kindness can echo far beyond its moment. Even now, photos of the kneeling king circulate through social media and fan communities. Stories of scarves waved in solidarity, of strangers united in quiet awe, serve as reminders that compassion is contagious. The ripple effect stretches beyond the walls of University Arena, inspiring not only future fans, but anyone who encounters the story. It is a lesson in the enduring power of intentional, human-centered action. And so, the legacy of November 10th, 1972, is not merely a concert date, it is a moral milestone. It illustrates that fame magnifies choices, and choices define character. Elvis Presley, the King, will always be remembered not only for his music but for the night he transformed panic into empathy, and thousands of spectators into witnesses of humanity. How many more legends are defined by their choices off script rather than on stage? Moments like this remind us that heroism isn't always about the spotlight. It's about the courage to act with heart. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that compassion can echo louder than fame. Witness how a single, deliberate choice can leave ripples that last for generations.